Canada starts here. The BC Jobs Plan blew through Campbell River on Monday. What happened? What does it mean? Where do we go from here? If that's what you're wondering, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to FaceTime with BC Jobs, Tourism and Innovation Minister Pat Bell. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much, Dan.
It must be interesting having a title that includes innovation. That sounds like the most broad-brushed ministry I've ever heard.
Yeah, and especially for me, coming out of the natural resource sectors, mining, agriculture, forestry, what does this guy know about innovation? But actually, it's what makes us competitive, and that's a real key. In today's world, we need to be as competitive as you possibly can be, and you need to bring innovation to those traditional industries. So it's well suited for the portfolio.
So innovation goes hand in hand with job creation, and job creation was certainly the theme when you brought the BC Jobs Plan here to Campbell River yesterday at time of this taping. It's one of those things, though, I get the feel it's hard to sink your teeth into it to explain to people exactly what's happening because there are so many intangibles. We don't know what we're coming out with on the other end of this exercise. We really kind of don't know what we're going into. So maybe you could just lay a bit of groundwork for us. Campbell River is a pilot project community because, in part, they did a lot of work in advance and they have the potential to show some results.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and for me, I always use one word. And in fact, I use this word so much, my staff bought me a baseball hat with this word on it, and that's focus. And I think that's really the key, is understanding what it is that you have a natural competitive advantage in. What sorts of economic initiatives is it that you're good at, and then really focusing your efforts on those areas where you have a natural competitive advantage. As the world is shifting its economic outlook, and we're seeing the global economy moving from North America into Asia in terms of the large economic generators, everyone is going to be chasing the Asian miracle. What's going on in China, trying to service that market, trying to take advantage of a collaborative trading relationship into China, into India, into Korea, and particularly other countries as well in the Asian marketplace. So the question to ask is, what products do they want? What do they need? How can we service that market? And what is it that we do well? Who are our competitors? And can we outcompete those other jurisdictions? So focus is a key word that I always bring to the table, and that's probably the easiest way to think of the job strategy.
So you gather together 70, 80 people, business, community leaders, First Nations, along with support staff. You sit them in a room and you say, essentially, generate some ideas for me.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Campbell River was well suited to that because of all the work that's gone on, particularly over the last 3-4 years. Campbell River's been trying to reinvent itself, think about where the key economic drivers are. We've seen the challenges in forestry, the challenges in fisheries. Tourism isn't really kind of driving the economy to the level that we would like to see yet. So what are the key opportunities? How do I identify what those are? And it's because it's a new market. I mean, that's the thing that people don't get right now, is the world has changed. It's never going back to where it was. The European Union will continue to be important, but clearly will not be the big economic driver that people thought it would be.
Certainly not at the moment.
Absolutely. You look at everything that's going on there. The United States, I shared this, $1 trillion in debt 8 years ago, $15 trillion in debt today on an annual GDP of about $17 trillion. So they're rapidly approaching a debt level of 100% debt to GDP ratio. Very, very challenging for them. Just think about that. As they approach $20 trillion in debt, if interest rates were at 5%, something that you and I can most certainly relate to, I think both of us remember 20% interest rates. At 5% interest, that's $1 trillion per year in interest. Their total budget's only $4 trillion, so it would be 25% of their budget. So the world has changed. China, India are growing very, very quickly. We need to figure out how we plug into those economies. And I think we have tremendous natural assets, whether it be our natural resources, our technology, our multicultural environment, the taxation regime that we've established, the flights that you have back and forth. All those things, I think, really work to our advantage.
So you generated, or this group yesterday generated what was shortlisted down to about 20 possibilities. We heard 10 of them. They sounded kind of generalized. I kind of had the expectation that coming out of this we were going to hear finite projects. Let's have a sawmill. Let's have this or that. Specific industry, X number of jobs. Instead, we're on a much more general sense at this point, and we have to narrow things down. Where do we go from this list?
So that was first steps yesterday, and I actually thought it went pretty well because we saw kind of an array of initiatives coming forward that maybe weren't specific, but they framed the areas of interest, and I think that's appropriate. I think that makes a lot of sense. Next stage now is for a much smaller group, and we'll help support that. Economic development folks here from Campbell River, First Nations, union folks clearly will be invited in as well. We'll take those 20 initiatives and narrow it down probably to about 3 or so. And we'll present that back to the larger group of people, say, how do you feel about us prioritizing these 3 or 4 or 2 areas of endeavor so that we can really try and show results quickly. I'm a big believer in maintaining momentum, and I think one of the biggest challenges with all these different initiatives is that they can take too long to deliver. You don't have the kind of impact in a time that people will acknowledge is a direct relationship to the activities that have been pursued by the original group. So, you know, if we can 6 months from now demonstrate to people a meaningful impact, that things are actually happening relating to those 2 or 3 or 4 different areas of focus, then people start buying in that this can actually work, and then that builds momentum, and momentum just really moves you through to a place where you want to be seeing the significant levels of growth that we all would hope to have. So it is momentum, it's quick results, and that's why you have to focus on just a few areas.
You mentioned union. I don't recall seeing union representatives there yesterday.
No, invited, and we're going to continue to invite them to the table. I believe that they are critical to the success of it. I related back to the Mackenzie situation. In Mackenzie, the Steelworkers Union, the CEP were key players as well as the PPWC. Actually, they were all there in terms of helping support the recovery efforts of Mackenzie. And I am a big believer that you need to have labor in the room as you're working on the development of the strategy and the implementation. Everyone plays a role in this. There's no room for one group to say, well, I don't have a role in this and there's nothing I can do to help support it. You know what? That's not true. There's always something that each individual has to contribute to a successful plan.
Keeping in mind that you're not just going to, Pat Bell's not going to make a decision on his own. You heard a lot of ideas yesterday. What were the ones that you liked the sound of?
Well, actually, very good point, because it's not my decision. It is the community's decision. I'm here to help facilitate it, maybe to steer it a bit with some of the knowledge I have of what's going on internationally, particularly in China. I've been there, as you know, I think 7 times in the last 3.5 years. So I've got a reasonable idea of what can sell and what doesn't sell in that marketplace. So, you know, some of the things for me that were quite interesting, certainly around the notion of fiber and the potential for a sawmill or the potential for an expansion of the forest industry and into the value-added chain. There's a new initiative of a product called cross-laminated timber that I think may have an application here. It's intended for building larger buildings, really well suited to coastal hemlock. It would be an ideal species. So that one was an interesting initiative for me. Aboriginal tourism, I think there's a huge opportunity in that front, and that was one of the areas that the team yesterday came to the conclusion this was something we think we can support. What we have seen through the Aboriginal Tourism Association of BC is once you get a market-ready business coming into the marketplace, it very quickly sees growth. Aboriginal tourism is the fastest growing arm of tourism in British Columbia. We did some exit surveys over the last couple of years of people leaving BC, and we asked them 2 questions. Why did you come to BC, and what did you do when you were here? Now, interestingly, you would think that that answer would be the same thing, but it actually wasn't. In many cases, people would come to go skiing, or to go golfing, or to go fishing, but they would participate in other forms of tourism activities while they were here. The one that resonated most frequently with people was the Aboriginal tourism experience. And what they did say is, next time when we come back, we're actually thinking about coming specifically for Aboriginal tourism. So with the variety of First Nations opportunities that we have in the region, the work that's gone on the coast of British Columbia, the bear viewing, the whale watching, all those different initiatives, I think there's a big opportunity. So those are a couple of the ones certainly there that for me resonated.
First Nations well represented yesterday as well.
Great representation. You know, we had Chief Dan Smith from the Leadership Council, 3 of the local First Nations chiefs. The one band that wasn't represented, or the chief wasn't here, I know there was representation. And they are key players. in the equation. Big employers already in the region. They have good access to land for land development purposes. The Aboriginal tourism piece is key. They've got forestry tenure. So they are part of the mainstream economy, and we need to make sure that we act in a way that reflects that knowledge.
Back to the process. You take these ideas. Your next order of business, I think, is to select a small steering committee, for lack of a better term, representation locally, some from the provincial government, to help narrow down this list of 20 into 3 or 4 key. They're going to report back within 60 days or so, and then the job becomes trying to determine what assistance is required.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what barriers there are, and that's kind of one of the keys, right? And it may be a barrier at a provincial level. It may be an infrastructure barrier. It may be access to workers in a specific type of skill set. It may be something at a municipal level. It may be a partnership. It may be financial capacity. You know, you don't really know for sure until you understand the specific project or opportunity that you're looking at. And that's where everyone needs to come to the table. The example in Mackenzie that I use is when we were trying to get that pulp mill sold to a new operator. It was in bankruptcy at the time. We were coming into winter. Very, very cold. Cold destroys pulp mills, so no question it wasn't something that was going to survive unless we reacted quickly. And each of the groups I mentioned, the union organizations, the local community, the provincial government, the First Nations, all had a role. I'll give you some examples. One of the keys in order to attract a new investor was a stable working environment where the operator knew that they had long-term certainty over the contractual relationship with the union. So the union came forward with a proposal, said we're prepared to reduce some of the cost of operations by rolling back some of the benefits that we get, some other key pieces of it. We want to gain if things get better, so we want to have kind of a reopener that allows us to win if things get better. But we're prepared to come and provide long-term certainty and sign an agreement that will allow a new operator to have that certainty. Local community said, we know we've got some taxation issues. We're prepared to work with you over the next 3 years to reduce your tax load. They set out a clear line in terms of what they would do. The province came to the table because there were some contamination issues on the site. And how are we going to manage those contamination issues? Who's going to have responsibility for it? There were some debts owed to the province that we needed to deal with and understand. And there was the issue of fiber supply for the actual mill. Where was that going to come from? The First Nations stepped forward, and they are key players in the log harvesting industry already. They hold significant tenure. They said, we can come to the table and help support the fiber supply for the region. So you kind of added those 4 different groups together, and all of a sudden you had a pretty attractive package. And the company that came forward has invested well over $100 million in that operation, and there's, you know, about 300 people back there working today as a result of that. So, you know, it was a well-organized strategy. It was time qualified. There was real urgency behind it. And I think we got a pretty good result.
But every strategy has to be tailored to the specific proposal. And in that sense, it's very difficult for you to come here and say, this is what the province has to offer. You can't just say, oh, we'll throw money at it. And so in some ways, it makes it difficult for people, I think, to sink their teeth into what can Victoria do for Campbell River in terms of the BC Jobs Plan. Do you find that a little bit on the frustrating side in terms of delivering the message?
You know, I think the issue that arises is traditionally people think of kind of economic development initiatives around kind of some of the stuff that's gone on over the last 3 or 4 years, the Obama plan where they deployed, you know, literally trillions of dollars in infrastructure spending. We did that here in Canada as well to a different extent. So, you know, people think of it more as, well, go and spend a bunch of money building some roads and that will help support our community. While that does happen for a period of time, you need to do it logically and thoughtfully and make sure that it improves your competitiveness so that when the market does return, whether it's for lumber or for minerals or for gas or for tourism or for whatever it happens to be, you take advantage of that. So I think that you know, the answer is that is always a frustration, because what you're really asking people is, what is it that we do really well in this area that we can be very competitive in? What are your dreams and aspirations? One of the things that we've heard consistently for as long as I was Forest Minister, even when I was Ag and Lands Minister, was why aren't we sawing some of the second growth wood in this area? What are the barriers to that? Bioenergy is another kind of key opportunity, a clustering opportunity for that. And how do we make that happen? And there's big barriers there. Not insurmountable barriers, but how do we manage tenure? It's already fully deployed out to all the different First Nations and companies that are here. How do we do it in a way that incents someone to come and spend $100 million to build a brand new sawmill that employs 200 and some people and allows us to retain those resources in the local area? So it's kind of a long way of saying sometimes people aren't quite at the place where they understand what the vision is, and for me it's more about trying to guide that and know what the international community is looking for and how can I bring those resources to play here in Campbell River.
And the example you just gave, finding that fiber source through the variety of people who have tenures and whatnot, is an example that could well be one of the things that we work on here in Campbell River towards that second growth mill. That's a very real possibility.
Absolutely, and that's a great example because, you know, sometimes the answer is not the traditional answer. In fact, usually if it was the traditional answer, someone would have already done it, and we wouldn't be thinking about why don't we have a second growth sawmill here. It would already be in place and running and people would be employed. So the answer may be something that is out of the ordinary. So what's in everyone's best interest? I know that the First Nations in the region would love their logs to stay right here, get manufactured here, and get sold as a value-added product. I know that industry in the area would like to be able to do that as well. One of the barriers is we don't have a competitive type of mill that is able to produce at the same sort of cost structure that you're seeing out of the interior or in China or Japan or other jurisdictions. So there's always that pressure on log exports as a result of that. So the answer for me is, well, let's have a competitive mill. So how do we attract that company? You need to have tenure to attract the company. If you don't have the company here, you can't attract the tenure. So how do we connect the First Nations and existing operators with a proponent who's interested in making that level of investment and encourage them to come and have that mill over a long enough period of time? I think the answer is on our doorstep. And it is in China, and their interest in having offtake agreements and supply agreements. The key will be pulling all the tenure holders together and getting them to agree to a long-term commitment, a 20-year commitment.
And you think that's doable?
It will be challenging. We've been doing a lot of work up in the Terrace area on this issue as well. Very similar situation, broadly held tenure holdings. I think we're close to something up there, and I think it's doable here.
Because the people in Campbell River now see logging trucks pouring through this town, fully loaded, and yet they're not stopping at any mill along the way. That's something you'd like to change.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I am a big proponent of getting as much value out of the product that we possibly can. I know that there is a market for this, but I also know that we need to be competitive. And by competitive, I mean, you know, the big interior mills today are producing at a cost of $85 or $90 per 1,000 board feet. That is a very low cost production system, and it costs $100 million plus to build a mill that is of that quality. So it's a big investment. It's not a small investment. And if you're not competitive, if you try and build a small mill or a mill that's cost structure isn't built on the principles of a highly productive environment, then you'll be the first one to close. And of course, that's what we've seen over the last number of years here.
You had a message that you came back to time and again yesterday, which was, let's make the most of this opportunity quickly, and let's avoid the second guessing. Let's avoid the bickering and infighting. Let's get on with it. We've got no time for that. I heard that from you 2 or 3 times. It came up again and again. Could you elaborate on that? It sounds as though you really want this to move and move quickly, and we simply do not have time for any bickering.
So I think the real challenge for people to understand is we're not the only ones trying to do this. Australia is trying to do it. I know that Washington and Oregon are looking at it right now. I'm sure California will be there, Montana, Idaho, other states. You know, Alberta already has its own challenges. So there are other jurisdictions looking at tapping into these new market opportunities that exist, whether it's outbound product going to China, India, Korea, or inbound tourists, or inbound investment coming from those jurisdictions. I mean, China's sitting on $3 trillion worth of international reserves right now. And their central government has actually said to industry, we want you to go and invest internationally and be a better global player in the environment that we have. So the dream that someone might have about a backcountry tourist operation, a whale watching operation that's maybe a $4, $5, $6 million investment, and they can't attract that capital, there are people around the world that would love to invest in that kind of opportunity, but they also want to invest everywhere else. So whether I want their investment to come to Campbell River, I don't want it to go to Tacoma, or I don't want it to go to Portland or somewhere else. So, we need to understand this is a competition. It's time qualified. Everyone else is in the business. And if we pass by this opportunity, I don't know when the next opportunity will come along. It will eventually come along. It just may not be when you and I are still working at it, that's all.
Heading back to the conference itself, as usual, our intrepid FaceTime streeter team went to the conference and caught some comments during a break in the action. We've got a clip for you here.
I think the largest challenge we have right now is providing that skill training development for the younger generation. As an example, in the logging industry, many of the experienced loggers are reaching the age of retirement, and there's very little training for them. And training is costly, not only for the industry, but for the government as well. That's why it's so important to be able to collaborate here and look at the Center of Excellence, where we could have the technology training to go along with any post-secondary training that individuals may want.
What I felt really good about today is a lot of the ideas talked about opportunities for young people. It's easy for Campbell River to become a retirement community and be filled with people with an average age of over 60. But a lot of the ideas today talked about young people, those who are still here and those who have left. We need to find a way to get them back. And if we can have opportunities in training and put the potential to get them back, it'll make it remain a balanced community, because we need a balanced community. And it was really encouraging to hear those ideas. The trades was featured, but also professional training was featured too. So the North Island College has a lot of potential to help out with that.
I mean, the projects that have been discussed are just really exciting, and it's around where is there opportunity in the community to grow? What are the strengths that exist with our businesses and industries? And how can we use the strengths in our communities to prepare people to be able to take part in those? So we've been looking at immigrant strategies and how we can work with new opportunities with forest in our forestry, or new opportunities with our resource sectors. And I think when you see the projects that are coming up it'll be concrete and specific, and it shows really well for our future.
This economic forum, the whole point of today's exercise is to come away from today with a short list of potential projects that the government and Campbell River can put their collective energy behind, so that we can implement them over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. So the next steps from this meeting is that a committee will be formed, and that committee hasn't yet been formed, but a committee will be formed very shortly here that will look at the short list of projects and start to really screen them down based on the types of criteria that say, where can the government help us? How can they help us? What makes the most sense? How do we move this forward? Because we want to create jobs in 12 to 18 months. We want to implement these projects in 12 to 18 months. We don't want to just keep talking about things. We actually want to show some results.
Young people, let's work together. That seemed to be the message. Generally a positive impression I was getting after the conference was over. One of the things I didn't hear, there was talk of the massive BC Hydro John Hart replacement project, $1.35 billion. Everybody is sort of drooling over that one and the thought that what that could mean to the local economy. I didn't hear anything about the North Island Hospitals project. You have to assume the construction of 2 new hospitals, $600 million, I think was the last capital estimate, will be very big for this economy. It didn't necessarily come up, but is there any way these two processes, the BC Jobs Plan and the hospitals project, can work together to expedite this?
They may align. Those are always challenging issues in terms of where the province deploys its capital and how you kind of figure out what the highest priority projects are. We always kind of try and do it on the basis of a criteria of need. So where You know, a community, I'll just give you an example, Burns Lake right now has some really big challenges around the foundation in the hospital. The hospital actually functioned, by the way, spectacularly during the explosion and fire of about 10 days ago. Now, the staff in the region did a great job. Everyone deployed exactly according to the emergency plan. And keep in mind, for a little community and a little hospital like that, to have you know, 2 people sadly that were killed in the blast, 19 injuries, many of them severe, to be treated and sent out quickly, I think was just a great testament. But the foundation under the hospital is crumbling, so that's an issue that we need to deal with, and I just use that as an example. But the principle behind the deployment of all of our capital programs is on the basis of need. So where this one will fit in is unclear to me, but it could be one of the elements of it for sure.
Now, given the push to find results and the BC Jobs Plan and the tight timelines, relatively speaking, that we're under, North Island MLA Claire Trevena is saying, well then, we really should hear about funding for these hospitals in the next budget, the next provincial budget, which is coming pretty soon and is only maybe a month or 2 after the hospital's plan, the business case, was actually handed over to government. Do you think it's possible that this request for major capital expenditure for the hospitals will be dealt with in this upcoming budget? Because otherwise, the North Island MLA is saying, oh, we wait another year, we set the whole process back.
So the way that we fund capital projects is on a 5-year plan. So when projects are brought into the plan, we categorize, we look at all the different health authorities, the 6 different health authorities in BC, as well as the school districts and everyone else, and we determine where the highest levels of need are. We deploy typically about $3 billion per year in capital in that range. That would be an average year. About a third of that ends up in the highway system, a good chunk of it in the healthcare system and education. Those are the 3 big players in terms of that. So Minister Falcon ultimately is the one that makes those decisions, and we are in fact 2 weeks today away from budget, or maybe it's 3 weeks today. So we are right around the corner from that, and we'll see what comes with that. But you know, I think that the old way of thinking is government projects will help fund a local economy. The job strategy is about encouraging investors to come in and develop a private economy that drives it, and then the services support those private sector needs. So the key from our perspective is build a robust private sector economy, and government services follow that.
So the hospital doesn't necessarily fit within that mandate, but obviously we might see something from this in the next budget.
You know, again, that's Minister Falcon, so it's up to him, and he makes those decisions. I don't sit on Treasury Board. I did for a number of years. I'm actually glad to be off of it. I've got enough on my plate anyways, but you know, that certainly is something that they will make the appropriate decisions around, and it's based on need. And there are tremendous needs across the province. And having just been in Burns Lake, and you know, Masset is a very old hospital as well, or pardon me, Queen Charlotte City is a very old hospital as well. So you know, I know that there is need in many places. I'm not sure where Campbell River fits in.
Fair enough. Minister, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I know you're on a tight timeline today as well, heading over to Quadra.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it. My first visit over to Quadra. I know Jim Abrams has been trying to get me there for a long time, so I'm looking forward to spending some time with him today.
Once again, thank you very much. Our guest has been BC Jobs, Tourism and Innovation Minister Pat Bell. Just a little bit of business to take care of. Viewer comment segment. Last show, you may recall, we had Jason Price, band counselor for the Wee-Wacom First Nation. Jim Creighton wrote in saying, good choice for subject. Jason's a smart guy with good intentions. I hope he runs for City Council again. Are you listening, Jason? If you need to get a hold of us, once again, remember, FaceTime. You can find us at facebook.com/FaceTime4U. That's 4, the number 4. Like us, please, like us. Tell your friends about us. And you can also email us at face-time@shaw.ca. So ends FaceTime Volume number 3 with Jobs, Tourism and Innovation Minister Pat Bell. I'm Dan MacLennan. Thanks for sharing some FaceTime.